Okay, everybody. So let's see, we got going. I think I gave you all the instructions. But like I say, I anticipate we're going to have a lot of conversation. We're going to do our best to accommodate everybody. And as you just saw, it's difficult for us to find everyone. So the best thing is to try to chat your messages.
Chat, and I will have the email open and monitored.
Right.
So that
Great.
they can just forward it to the email and I can answer it there.
Yep, and that's the other thing. At the end of this meeting, if you still have more questions, or if you think of more questions afterwards, we have a new email address out that is bof@deepriverct.us. That email, we'll be monitoring that carefully and send any questions that you might have or any comments that you might think of. Okay, so I think we'll get started with this public hearing. Oh, there you go. Okay, and in the chat box is the email address. So let's see. I think to start the meeting, we'll go over to the Deep River Elementary School, if that's okay with you, Bud. Yep. Okay. And we can ask Superintendent White or any of the other folks from the school or from the Board of Education to fire away with your presentation if you can. Yeah, I don't know if everyone is muted again. I don't know why you would be. Brian White and oh, there we go. Deep River Elementary School.
Hey, all right.
Bud muted himself, I think.
Okay, so looks like we're in business. So good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Welcome.
you.
Sorry about that delay.
No problem. Well, good evening again, everybody, and it's nice to be here this evening, just sharing on behalf of our Deep River Board of Education our proposed 2021 budget. I'm joined by members of the Board of Education this evening on the call, as well as members of my leadership team. Essentially, what we've prepared this evening is just a overview of the budget, knowing that we'll have some time a little bit later for questions. And so we'll sort of walk through these few slides and look forward to any further discussion later this evening. Thank you. So there is our budget number for the 2021 school year. We are proposing a budget of $5,470,471 for the Deep River Elementary School. This represents an increase of 3.92% or $206,000 over current year. And what I'd like to say as we get underway, this proposed budget is the culmination of a process where we applied a lot of rigor this year. The Deep River Board of Education has spent significant amounts of time really understanding this budget. And we recognize that we're entering into a time of uncertainty, and we believe that the budget before you for the consideration of this board is fiscally responsible and meets the needs of our school in Deep River. There are no new spending initiatives in this budget. It's largely what we would call a roll forward budget, in the sense that it really just supports, for the most part, existing programs, although we did find some efficiencies that I'll be talking about. And we did have some unique factors this year which contributed to the increase of what would have been an otherwise close to flat budget. So we'll talk through that in detail. Some of the things that we talk about when we talk about our budget development process is all the various things that we need to be in compliance with. The previous slide just spoke to the fact that there are any number of state and federal mandates that the schools are obligated to be in compliance with. And when you put all of those mandates together, many of which are unfunded by the state and federal level, it does result in program cost for our local schools. We worked very hard to develop a budget that was in line with the current strategic priorities of the system. And of course, just really maintaining an environment that's conducive to learning for our kids. So when we talk about budget drivers, as I mentioned, in terms of programmatic requests, there's really nothing new in this budget. But what you have is a budget that supports the contractual obligations of our various bargaining groups. Our cafeteria budget is a change from previous years, and this is something worth mentioning. We did spend a lot of time in our budget workshops as well as um, in other town and public meetings this year talking about how we budget for our cafeterias. One of the things that we had made some decisions about early on this fall as I was new to the role was revisiting the way in which cafeterias were budgeted for. In previous budget years, we would see a subsidy, and the purpose of that subsidy was to essentially support the overall functioning of the cafeterias. However, one of the costs that was not factored into that subsidy, at least entirely, was the salaries of our food service workers, including our food service administrator at the district level and their support staff. And so this year you will see upfront in the budget the cost of those employees. And that is a change from previous years that contributes to a larger budget number. But as we've shared in other budget processes, you just see right up front what the true cost of supporting that program is. So that does account for that change. Two of the major drivers, not only for Deep River this year, but across the region and the other budgets, are the health insurance costs. Based on experience, we're looking at an increased cost to insurance of 18%. That's a very large number. And that really accounts for a lot of the increase we see in the overall budget. The other driver in the area of insurance is contribution to our healthcare insurance reserve fund. Over the course of this year, we've had a number of discussions here in Deep River, but also on the district level, talking about the current condition of our self-insurance reserve fund, which was much lower than it should be. And one of the things that you'll see in this budget request is a proposal for a special appropriation to build the level in that reserve so that we have a good functioning insurance reserve fund. This is a cost that's being shared by all of the budgets in the region that contribute to our insurance policy. On the other side of the coin, so to speak, we do see some cost savings measures and operational efficiencies. What you'll see this evening is what we call a zero-based budget. I give a lot of credit not only to Christian Strickland, the principal, but my administrative team for really taking a deep dive into every line of this budget and identifying the true needs of the schools. And the Deep River Board of Education did a really great job this year, I think, asking the tough questions and really seeking to understand not only the current year, but what's necessary to support our great school in Deep River. And so with zero-based budgeting, if you were to do a line-by-line analysis, you'll see compared to current year, there are some lines where there'll be an increase. There's other lines where you'll see a decrease. And that's because the proposal we've put forward is really needs-based. We did find some opportunities for staffing efficiencies. One of the things I mentioned is that a significant driver is, of course, our contractual obligations. Typically where you find savings in an educational budget is in staffing when that's appropriate. It does represent the largest piece of the pie, so to speak. And we did find an opportunity for the reduction of half of a full-time position, which we felt we could achieve responsibly. We also found some opportunity in energy cost savings. I know this is something very important to the community. One of the very first things I was involved with as I came into the role over the summer was helping to move forward an energy project, which was proposed not only for Deep River Elementary, but other buildings in the Deep River community. We're very pleased to report a few months in that we've actually seen some nice savings both in gas and electricity. And some of those savings allowed us to lower the proposed budget for next year. So the next couple of slides you're going to see, I'm just going to speak to them very generally. These are taken directly from our budget document. What you see here is a pie chart which shows the overall percentage that each part of the budget represents. As you can see, we have 21.8% of the budget is benefits and 64% is salaries. And so when you put that together, you're looking at 85% approximately of the budget that really represents your staffing at Deep River Elementary. The other object codes that we talk about when we look at the budget, as you can see, are proportionally much smaller when compared with our staffing costs. You can see we have $110,000 budgeted for our professional and technical services, $270,000 for our purchase property services, another $270,000 for other services that support the functioning of the school. When you get into the instructional supply line, you can see it's very small by comparison, $141,000, and that's the cost for all of the various supplies that support the operations of a school over 1 year. We have $8,600 budgeted for property, and in the 800 object code, we have just under $5,000. And so at a glance, that's what your budget looks like. And when we go to the next slide, you can see more of a cost comparison between current year and the requested budget for 2021. I'll speak to this very quickly, as I know this is not new information. But in the salary line, we see a change of 1.96%, or $67,437 over current year. Our employee benefits, as I mentioned, that's a pretty substantial increase for us when you factor in the health insurance costs. So we see a 6% increase over current year, or a change of $73,308. In the line of professional and technical services, we see a percentage change of over 18%, or $20,759. For property services, we see an increase of 9.73%, or $26,342. Our other purchase services represented 8.67% increase, or $23,340. In the area of supplies, we have a decrease. We found the equivalent of 1.96% in savings, or $2,777 in that area. In the property line, we see a savings of negative 28.45%, or $2,467. And in our other object code, we see an increase of just over 5%, or $249. And so when you put all that together, that's how we arrive at our requested amount of $5,470,471. One of the things that we talked a lot about over the course of our budget development process, and this will continue to be an area of interest for us as we look to the future, is looking at our enrollment trends and projections. As I'm sure you're all aware, we've seen a real decline in enrollment over the past several years, and that's been a trend we've seen at all of our elementary schools in the region, not just Deep River. We are starting to see a flattening of this trend, where those class sizes seem to be leveling off. It was just about 5 years ago that we had almost 80 more students at the school, and so that just gives you a sense of the decline that we've seen over the period of time, starting in 2015-16 to present year. With that being said, we don't see any significant changes in enrollment next year, at least none that would necessitate a real change in staffing levels. But that is data that we will continue to talk about, as it is the most significant cost driver. And then finally, what you can see here is a comparison between current year and next year, looking at what class sizes are projected to be. Once again, there's no change significant enough to necessitate a change in staffing, positive or negative. I know the Deep River Board of Education was very pleased to support this budget that maintains our current class sizes, as they're in line with our class size guidelines. And so that concludes our overview. We know it was pretty brief, but hopefully comprehensive. We understand that this isn't the most ideal form to have this conversation. So we wanted to just kind of give you that run through, again, with the understanding that my team and I will be here later to answer any questions folks might have.
Thank you, Brian. But I should have turned this meeting over to you earlier, because this is in fact the Board of Finance meeting, and I have to turn your volume down again. And I think that you would probably prefer just to do your presentation, and we can take questions for the whole thing.
That's good. Am I speaking?
Yes.
Okay, everyone can hold me. Good evening, everyone. I am George Bud Eckenroth, and I have the honor of serving as the chairman of the Deep River Board of Finance. Tonight's meeting is, I think it's been outlined already, but tonight's meeting, the purpose of it is a public hearing to discuss the proposed budget expenditures which will begin July 1st of this year and end June 30th of 2021. Well, we're here to discuss expenditures. It's almost impossible to discuss expenditures or the budget without making reference to revenues, and I will also comment on revenues as we move forward. As you look around, you will probably see that this budget meeting is different than most, and that is because we're operating under the directions of the executive orders of the governor, who says that we cannot gather more than, I thought the number was actually lower, but certainly the law is we cannot gather in more than 250 people groups. That's what I thought. I thought the number is much smaller than that. I'm on an old executive order. Thank you very much. The governor recognized that in spite of all the uncertainty in our economy and our health, we still have to put together a municipal budget. However, he suspended the requirement for you to vote in present on that budget. While I understand the rationale, it is still sad, and I actually miss looking at all of you. Under the direction of the governor's executive orders, the Board of Selectmen will meet, I believe it is a will as opposed to has met, to authorize the Board of Finance to adopt a budget for fiscal year 2021. So tonight what we will do is we will review and discuss the proposed budget. I like to use this picture of long ago at the budget meetings. I just wish to remind all of us that there has been lots of people who have come before us, who are doing or did exactly what we're here tonight to do. So tonight we will discuss and review. Your input will be used by the Board of Finance to hopefully accept the proposed budget expenditures, and we will do that at the town annual meeting scheduled for Monday, May 18th at 7:30. Assuming there is an affirmative vote on that budget, the Board of Finance will then vote on to set the mill rate to fund the necessary expenditures. A more of a brief look back, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance met for the first time in a workshop to begin to develop the budget on Tuesday, May 3rd. A week
We lost you, bud.
Yeah, everything just froze.
that we're all still living.
There you go.
He's back. You there? Yep, you're back, bud.
I'm back?
Yep.
Okay.
You're back.
I'm back. Well, thank you.
All right.
It is good to be back. All right. Well, as I was saying, as we move through our workshop, the information, the financial problems that we're having were with us at all times. And we have no reason to assume that many of those financial difficulties are not present in our time. That weighed very heavily on us as we began to assemble our budget. Here is the budget that it is in the format that many of you are used to looking at. It has been the format, I attempt to say this humorously, it may be the format that those who rode in trolleys looked at, I'm not sure. It is the budget that is out there posted on the town websites. Many of us like budgets, like numbers and columns that add up. However, I'm not convinced that all these numbers give us the clarity that we really need to understand what's going on here. So I'm going to start by abbreviating all those numbers. I think I'm using the word right, an abbreviated place. And I'm going to use the traditional accounting equation of revenues less expenses. And you can see that there will be a budget shortfall on these numbers. I want to define the term appropriated here. The term appropriated means that it is the expenditures that were approved by the town at last year's annual meeting on May 20th, 2019. It has been supplemented during the year by additional town meetings. Now, I have identified the numbers, the expenditures there, and they are reasonably good. And again, they are reflective of approval by the town. The revenues above it, however, are not as current. They reflect the numbers that we presented to the town at the May 19 annual meeting. So there is potential we could be introducing some confusion as we move through, but I think I can identify that confusion as we again move through. If you were to look at the summary that I provided for you here, you will see that there is not much of a change in our expenditures. Up at the top, I give you a headline. We have attempted to hold expenditures flat. I emphasize the attempt. We have attempted very hard to keep our expenditures down, but the term flat, which is what it may look like here, is not particularly accurate, and you will see what I mean as we move forward here. Let's begin by focusing on our expenditures. I have given you more detail of our expenditures, but before I start chatting about them, let me put them into a context. Here is a visual. The town expenditures reflect both expenditures for the town and total education. You can see by the gray bar that most of the expenditures are associated with education. Because education is such a large portion of our budget, it drives where our budget is going to go. Here is the same information with just the percentages. As you can see, our budget consistently, 70% of our budget is towards education. Here is a graph of total town expenditures. And for some reason, when I developed this graph, I thought it was important that you know it also includes capital and education. I'm not sure why. If you note, there are steps for every year in the budget. There is a fairly substantial step between fiscal year 18 and 19, fiscal year 18-19 and fiscal year 19-20. The magnitude of that step will become a major point of our discussion tonight. Here are those numbers again. Here are the numbers which are behind the chart there, and you will see the large increase again in fiscal year 19-20, which we will talk about. Here is the education expenses, and again, I suggest to you there is a stepping upward each year. It is the magnitude of that step in fiscal year 2021 that we will spend a lot of time on tonight. Here is the total education expenses. When I say total, it consists of the elementary school, which Brian just chatted about. It also includes the regional school. I want you to pay attention to that number, that 536,562. It will be important for our discussion this evening, just to give you a reference point on the magnitude.
What's gone? Sound
Yeah,
good.
we lost them, right?
Angus, you're muted.
Your internet connection is unstable. Okay.
Ah.
Am I back?
Yes.
All right, good. I create suspense, I hope.
All right, Lori, we're looking at you, just so you know.
Oh, wonderful.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, I'm drinking coffee.
Am I still good? Am I still good? Okay, okay. So
Yeah, we don't, but we don't have the budget on the screen.
I've got it on mine.
Yeah,
Do you? All right,
Yeah.
maybe it's my problem.
All
All right.
good?
You have active speaker highlighted.
I'm pointing out to you that 536,562 is going to be important for the evening, and I'm asking you to sort of put it into a context. 1 mil for the town of Deep River is equal to about $510,000. The reason I put it into a range is while 1 mil equals 510,000, we assume that not everyone pays their taxes either at all or in a timely fashion, and we expect to collect about 98% of it. So I'm just offering to you that the increase is when put up to a mill is a large requirement. I'm going to say the exact same thing again. Here is the appropriated numbers. Here is the town and education for the appropriated and for the proposed budget. And I've given you the percent sharing between town and education once again. At this time, let's look at the changes in each. You recognize the 536,000 that we talked about a moment ago. The town budget has decreased by $571,000. There's lots of stories behind that, of which we will make reference to. I'm expanding that slide so that you can see the cut between the elementary school budget and the regional 4 budget. And you will see that most of the increase is coming to us from the regional 4 budget. Actually, as explained to me by both Brian, that the elementary school the budget itself is somewhat constant, did not change much. However, it is the allocation from the supervisory district that raised the elementary school's budget. So there is more detail on that. Let's move on to the town expenditures. What I did to develop this sheet, and take comfort, we will not use this sheet to explain it. We'll look at it in higher fonts. But what I did to develop this is I took the budget that you are currently looking at and I summarized all of the detail. So all you have there before you is the summary, bottom line of each section. Before we talk about those expenditures, you should remember that the town of Deep River is covered by a union contract, and many of the employment conditions are set in that union contract. For instance, in the current budget, the union contract, the agreement is that we will increase salaries of town employees by 2.25%. So when we look at the increases by department in a moment, you will see many of those smaller increases are driven by salary increases. Also, employees are paying 5% of their health insurance premium in this budget. All right, so beginning to look at town detail. Let's look at my red lines first because they are negatives. That is what I wish to focus us on. While it says total town hall, that line really covers all town buildings. With the recent decline in oil and gas prices, the town has been able to lock in some of those prices in contracts. In addition to that, we started last year we began a project last year that was a municipal energy savings program, and we are beginning to see substantial reduction in electricity there. So we've incorporated in many of those savings. So we expect that budget to be down by 19.8. While we're talking about the municipal energy project, the majority of the work and the investment and the savings will be at the elementary school. Let's go down to planning and zoning, a large number decrease there. For years, we had a planning and zoning officer. She has retired and was replaced by a lower cost person there. Let's go to the blue. Elections. While it is a small number, I bring it to your attention. For the last several years, several being a large number, the election budget has gone over. It's a small budget, so when it goes over, we never paid a lot of attention to it. But what we began to realize is we just had not properly budgeted. In addition to that, the registrars of voters have a substantially more higher obligation education. So we faced up to the fact that there was higher costs there, and we made that change. And the assessor is it is a large number. I'll just call it out. The assessor and the tax collector were having difficulty technologically talking to each other. So the solution was to enter into a contract, and most of their records will be maintained on a cloud, and that is that incremental cost. Going over to the next group of departments, I wish to bring to your attention the total employee benefits. While there are several costs included in this line, the major costs that is a negative is the change in the health insurance carrier. In the previous year, we were part of a consortium with the school. We have now moved to a consortium with the state of Connecticut, and has brought about a substantial amount of savings. Most of it you're seeing there in that line there. I'm going to take you down to the blue, total public utilities. We certainly pay for street lightings, etc. The incremental cost here is the Connecticut Water Company maintains our fire hydrants, and they have raised the cost of doing that by about the $9 million there. I bring you up to police with a green line. It's a new color for us, only to remind you that we have a constable retiring in June. We'll probably have one retiring later in the year. However, with those retirements, we have to replace our staff, and there is incremental trainings and the need for additional uniforms, which are really driving that increase there. Moving on to other numbers here. I've got the total public health nursing services. We have a contract with the Lower Valley Visiting Nurses to do that for us, and that is a contractual a cost upgrade for their contract there. And I wish to bring you down to total debt reduction. There is an increase of 30,000. I mentioned a moment ago that we executed during the year a municipal energy program. We borrowed about $150,000 to fund that upgrade, and we attempted to carve out the debt repayments to be consistent with the savings, and it seems to be proving itself correctly. I should also point out, as I pointed out a moment ago, most of the savings, anticipated energy saving, will be at the school. The school has agreed to pay us a portion of this note obligation. We're at general government capital detail. I shall introduce some more colors to help us understand this. I'm just going to name the items, and when we get to the revenue source, I'll expand on what they are contained. Fire department, we have $205,000. The LOSIP grant, or the infrastructure grant from the state, of 31, and then we have park upgrades of 5,400 and elementary school roof of 40,000. Well, I'll go to the revenue sources in a moment. The town maintains in its budget the capital requirements to maintain the elementary school, which is why you see it there. Now, let me point out to you that the infrastructure grant that we saw dollar amount is tied to the revenue. I'm in the revenue portion of our of the budget. The state of Connecticut sets aside dollars every year for infrastructure improvements and assigns it in some formula to every town in the state. To get access to those dollars, we must apply for it. But note that we have it in capital, and we are also offsetting it with the amount of dollars we think are available to us. Moving up, you'll notice there is an assumed FEMA grant of $205,000. The fire department requested, and we approved, that we would begin to fund breathing apparatus. They need to replace their periodically replace their breathing apparatus. I think there is a more technical name for that. And it would be done over a 5-year period. And we initially had $40,000 in there. After the fire department requested that of us, the fire department applied for a grant so that they could pay for all of the breathing apparatus, assuming the grant was given. If the grant is not funded, we will meet our obligation to fund the $40,000 for breathing apparatus, and we will fund it with, if you move up to my yellow line, about 10 years ago, the Board of Finance set money aside in a capital fund. We have about $30,000 there. We have not been particularly good at continuing to fund it, but we also have not accessed it. We are going to access it this year and fund both the school and the park capital needs. And again, if the fire department grant does not, the FEMA grant does not come through, we will fund the additional breathing apparatus out of that fund. Now, again, I'm still in capital. I bring to your attention what we labeled here, revaluation funding. The state of Connecticut requires every town every 5 years to revalue the property values in its town. Property values basis upon which we tax. Okay? We agreed with a firm that they would carry out that revaluation for us at $100,000. We have spent 60 of it this year, and we will spend 40 of it next year. It has the title of pre-funding. Knowing that this obligation was before us several years, for now, we have begun to pre-fund those dollars. So, and my next line item, which has been with us actually, whether you realize it or not, is a new fire truck. This expenditure in fiscal year 1920 is what is the bigger, when we looked at expenditures, it's one of the biggest drivers of that big jump. To look at this accurately, let's go back to where we began 1920. It was in the budget in the 1920. It was approved by the town in that budget. What we as the Board of Finance did was to assume that the new fire truck would be financed with a new borrowing, which would equal that dollar amount. Consequently, we did not assume any interest or debt repayment in that budget. We recognize when we were beginning to prepare our budget in March, we assumed that the fire department would move forward on that fire engine and that we would execute a borrowing. We anticipated that borrowing would be done over a 5-year period and that we would have an obligation in the range of $150,000 per year. And that was in our budget for the most part, our proposed budget. Yes.
I'm sorry, everyone. If you have some dogs barking in the background, it'd be really great if you could mute yourself. There's only a few people that are unmuted, so thank you.
All right. So,
Here's it is coming through.
in our budget, as we began, I cannot remember when we began to intensively focus on it, but as we became aware of the incremental costs from the elementary, from the school and its magnitude, we began to look at every cost the town has to try to reduce it in any way we could. And we continue to look at a $150,000 fire debt repayment. And if you remember my first chart, when you look at the town being approximately 70% of all the expenditures compared to the education, it became a difficult task to minimize what we were going to ask citizens for. We eventually succumbed that we just removed the $150,000 from the budget. Put that into context, again, what we were looking at. We compared a mill for us is about 510. By the time we discount it for what we think we were going to receive is about 500. 150 as a percent of the dollars we expect to receive in 1 year is 0.13. Which means for every $100,000 of assessed value, everybody would pay about $30. The average, according to Willow or Zoom, the average property value in the town of Deep River is about $271,000, which would mean if we had proceeded or kept this debt obligation in our budget, we would have asked the average household to pay about $65 per year, just to give you a frame of reference. I've done a lot of storytelling. I've shown you a lot of numbers. I have an obligation, I think, to sum up where the expenditures are. Because if I don't do it, you can do it. If you look at the expenditures, there is the change column, which does it for us. You have to remove, to get a better feel for the change in expenditures in this year's budget, you have to remove the 650 because we did not, while we recognize it as expense, we did not ask town people to pay for it because we simply assumed it would be financed. So removing that, we have a change of about $615,000, of which the school, if you remember the number I gave you an assignment to keep, is worth about $356,000 for leaving the town the net of 78. Now, I think I have an obligation to sum up all my stories with all those expenditure numbers. Now that I said it, I want you to disregard it. The reason I want you to disregard it is it's not a standalone budget. We have revenues. We have increased revenues that we are looking at, and the appropriations that I'm using to make that comparison, I think, are too high. I will make reference to that in a moment. But take you back to page 1 where we started from. The current mill rate that we are charging our citizens is 29.42. If we were to hold our mill rate at that 29.42, we would find that expenditures would exceed our assumed revenue by $451+. We have two sources available to us to fund that shortfall. We can increase the mill rate, or we can draw on our general fund surplus. Hopefully I'm going to try and change the tone of my voice. Hopefully you found confidence in what I said before. I don't know what to say on this page. At our April Board of Finance meeting, we talked about how we are going to fund the shortfall. We left that meeting with what you see in front of you. We left that meeting with a 0.63 increase in mill rate, and that we would use our surplus to fund about $135,000. But there is no consistency, there's no certainty on the Board of Finance on how we are going to fill that gap. If we were to draw on we will draw on our surplus, our accumulated surplus, for some portion of that shortfall. I have put down there that we have $1.9 million available to us. For those of you who have the budget in your hand, you will find that number surprising. Let me explain it to you. Here is the top of our worksheet there. You see the audit numbers and the appropriated budget, right? That appropriated budget, I believe, is the revenues in the appropriated budget do not reflect the actual revenues we have collected. The tax collector has done an excellent job of going and collecting back taxes, and citizens of the town of Deep River have been very faithful in funding their current taxes. I do believe that some of the expenditures in the appropriated budget we will not spend at the level we budgeted. I therefore believe we will end the current year with a small surplus, almost to the point that I can say it is a balanced budget. However, that is much better than the $200,000 that you see in that appropriated budget shortfall. So I believe the 1.9 is a good number to consider as a surplus to fund any of our shortfall that we think necessary. Now, while I'm going to continue to talk about the budget, I'm going to switch away from some of the numbers. At the April 14th Selectmen meeting, the Board of Finance, the Selectmen agreed to lower the rate for taxpayers, for late payments for taxpayers affected by the virus. That payment, while there is still some degree of confusion on what that payment is, but the intention is it would reduce the interest penalty if people pay their July bill 90 days late. Now, we have no way to know or to measure the effect of this tax relief. We actually have no way to measure any influence of what the pandemic will do on our cash flows. Here is a recent article in the Stanford Advocate. That is Melissa McClaw. She is with the Secretary of the Office of Policy and Management. She and the governor on Friday said how sobering the budget holes are from the it is very difficult on it has been tough on our fiscal health. That is a concern to the town of Deep River. Our budget is very dependent on the state support. You can see that we are expecting to get over $2 million from the state. Putting that on a percent basis, 12% of the revenues we are assuming in this budget are coming from the state of Connecticut. Now, so therefore, my 1.9 that I start my conversation with is available as a cushion, a shock absorber for the uncertainties that we are facing in the future. Hopefully it is a good number, but it will not cover a state saying we cannot fund you this year. So consequently, what we are pursuing, we are talking with lenders about a tax anticipation borrowing. At our April meeting, We talked about a $4 million borrowing in July. We calculated an interest. We assumed that the interest would be about $20,000 if we pay them back in October. So you see it on the cover here. I wanted to let you know this could be the only time we get to talk together about these things. We may do a tax anticipation borrowing. We may borrow some number, 4 million, and we would then pay it back in October as our revenues come in. We did not reflect in this current budget the tax, any sort of interest payment, but I wanted to put it out there so that you would be aware of what we're considering. Now, let's talk about the Board of Finance. There are 6 of us. A majority of the Board of Finance, which I told you in the beginning, will be given the authority by the selectmen to vote on accepting this budget. The majority of members of the Board of Finance want to minimize any tax increase. They believe citizens need relief right now. We're not taking on any additional debts in the future. The future is too uncertain. We'll deal with the additional things in the future. I wish to point out, though, that there is a minority on the Board of Finance. And that minority says that progress only comes from investing in our future. You invest in yourself, you invest in your family, you invest in your community. It is easy to invest in easy times, in good times. You have to continue to invest through these things. Now, that is the divide of the Board of Finance. And several of our meetings have gotten exciting on these philosophicals. And the last thing, we are all on the Board of Finance worried about that surplus, how it could be used, and what kind of cushion it will provide with our uncertainty. So I don't know where the Board of Finance is going yet. Your input will help us decide. And that is it for what I have to say. I actually began this slide when I first did it saying, I will see you at the town meeting. I do not know if that will be true, but again, your input will be used by the Board of Finance to determine what their vote is on the proposed expenditures. That brings us back to where we started.
Getting you back unmuted, but you're going to have to turn your volume down. Try to beat some of the echo. Okay, let's see. I'm going to try and unmute all of the members of the Board of Finance, the Board of Education, and the Board of Selectmen so that we can participate in answering questions if we can. So if you see, Russ, I'm trying to unmute you now. So try to unmute yourself because it's not working. Brian, I'm trying you right now. Let's see. Oops, just got a text. Dwayne, I'm over. There's you. Oops, just unmuted again. Okay, Kristen, got you right here. Jim, you're all set. Bud, I'm going to unmute you. You muted yourself. You need to unmute yourself and turn your volume down. Okay. Christian Strickland, you're right there. I'm muting you right now. Bud, you're okay. Bill, you're all set. And that's the first page. Second page. Sorry, everyone, please. As I said in the beginning, this is a little bit cumbersome, big meetings. I really just do it upstairs and enjoy each other's company in person. And I actually really look forward to that day. John, which has to do. All regulars, unmuting you right now. Since you want to. I'll read them. Or, yeah. Okay, I think that's everything. And someone tell me if there's a bad echo. I have a bad echo, but I don't know if it's because I'm in the same room. Let's see. Lori, are you okay? Okay.
I'm here.
If I haven't unmuted you, chat me and let me know, and we'll go with questions. The very first question that came was from, it's over at Bud. I think you had the first one, I think.
The question I gave, you have the first question?
Can I answer from here?
No, that's okay. I can find it here. John Noonan from Shaler Pond Road had a question. I am new to reading your budget, and I cannot see any interest expense related to the $4 million plan. Where is that represented? Why not say 14 years in blank? Also, uncollectible taxes only went up $7,000. That's a small amount.
Can't understand you, Angus. Your echo is so bad, we can't understand you.
I think you spoke a little bit to the $4 million.
I did. I can certainly follow up on we did not put the 20, what we anticipate to be 20, but we did not put interest for the tax anticipation note. We're still talking about the tax anticipation note. We do not know whether we will proceed. We do not know the size of that. We would not know when we'll undertake it, et cetera. So I put it in the budget so that we could have this conversation. There is a line item in the budget for that interest, but it is currently still being discussed. So you are correct. There is no interest there for the tax anticipation note.
That's right. And the important part of this is by the conversation that we're having right now, and by the previous conversations, we're not saying that we're going to borrow. What we're trying to do is get authorization to borrow if we need to. If we see in the middle of August that we are very far behind on our taxes, and we're having to dip into our reserve fund further than we like. We want to be able to act quickly, as opposed to having to start the process at that time, which means, finding a bank. The banks that I've spoken to are all expressing the fact that while they're willing to work with us now, they don't know what their appetite is going to be for these as the season progresses. Municipalities across the state and across the country are looking for this kind of thing. So I believe that it's prudent to at least get us ready to do this if we need to. Of course, we hope that we don't need to, and we don't need to borrow all of the $4 million at once. We have the opportunity to borrow what we need when we need it, as opposed to all at one time. So I hope that answers your question. As far as the uncollectible taxes going up, only $7,000. Bud?
As I indicated before, the tax collector is doing an extremely good job of collecting back taxes. The number in our budget reflects prior back taxes that were not paid. Your question is a good one. We do not forecast tax anticipations in the future. With the minor exception, we assume we're not going to collect. We only collect 98% of our taxes. Hopefully that answers it. So they've done an excellent job of getting back taxes, and so there is a small what we're expecting. Actually, it was sort of verified by the tax collector and what's outstanding. So.
Yeah. Yep. But I'm still getting an awful lot of echo. So if you could try and turn your volume down a little bit more, would be great. Thank you. We could do that too. I think though it works if his volume is down, and we're not necessarily need to go through the computer. The next question, and I'm sorry, Mr. Moon, if that answers your question, I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please send another message through. The next question came from Dorothy and Michael. I'm up. Yeah. The question was, I would like to see a change in the sharing of healthcare expenses with the employees, but there's still a little bit of echo. I don't know about that. I would like to see a change in the sharing of healthcare expenses with the employees. We asked Dorothy a couple of times to try and expound on that. Hang on one second. I'm sorry, everyone. Hang on just one second. I'm going to try to get rid of this echo here. No, you don't need to be on mute. Your microphone needs to be, your speaker needs to be down, not your microphone. Your speaker's off. Okay, and that makes a difference because I'm not hearing anything, so that's great. Okay. Okay, so Dorothy, the only thing that I can do is speculate on what your question is about, and I don't quite understand the sharing of health expenses with the employees. We put a lot of effort into this year, actually over the course of the last 2 years, in trying to find an insurance, health insurance and health care for the employees that would be less expensive than what we're paying with Region 4. We have been successful this year in doing that, and we've seen we see substantial savings in this year's insurance for our employees. So I'm very grateful. I said at the last selectmen's meeting, I'm very grateful, and at the last Board of Finance meeting, to the municipal employees who did not have to open up the contract to agree to change the insurance, and they did. And we saved, I want to say it was close to $80,000 on insurance this year between the retirement of Ray and the savings on this by moving to the Connecticut 2.0 program. So I'm going to guess I hope that answers your question. Next came from Ricky Daniels at Paul's Landing. Why is the fire truck listed in the budget as a total amount as opposed to the annual lease purchase cost as been the customary method of purchase in the past? The unappropriated general fund seems to be significant enough to be able to include the annual payment. The total amount that is in this year's budget, and Bud, you're going to have to step in whenever I misstep on this, but the total amount that is in there is reflected in 2 places in this year's budget. It's in revenues and it's in expense. We were going to borrow for that truck, as you know, Rick, and that was a $650,000 borrow. As soon as we borrowed that, we were going to spend that $650,000 and purchase the truck. The next payment for that truck was not going to be in this fiscal year. It was going to be put over into the next fiscal year. So we would have seen a $170,000 payment in this coming up year, 2021 fiscal year, is when we would have seen that payment. That's why you see the $650,000 as opposed to the $170,000. There would not have been an additional $170,000 payment expense this year that would have come in the next year. And the unappropriated general fund is an interesting topic this year. Bud spoke to it briefly. I think we'll speak to it a number more times this evening. But to just kind of punch into that conversation is we've worked really hard. The whole town has worked really hard to get that up to where it is, close to where it should be. The state is looking to have 15%, and we're somewhere around, I want to suggest we're around 9 or 10%. So we're getting close to where we need to be, but we're not where we need to be yet, but we are substantially better off than we were as far as that goes. A lot of that was due to just good luck. The state ended us over the last couple of years providing more money than we budgeted for, more money. The legislature approved more money for our town than the governor's budget projected, and that we knew about when we built the budget. And that will come up in conversation later on, I imagine. Ricky, I hope that answered your question, but if you have anything else to say, please. Or if anyone has anything to say. Yes, the payment was, but the a lease purchase. Oh, interesting. I haven't looked at that. The last one that we did was a borrow. Interesting. We will look into that, a lease purchase. Either way, it ends up with the same payment over the course of the 5 years. Let's see. Lisa Bibiani from Whittlesey Brook Road was the next question, and this will be a good one for Bud. And the DMV says that sales are down 75% in car registrations for new cars. I think the Board of Finance should look at reducing the supplemental collection of revenue to less than what they have predicted. It's a good observation. And I think something that the Board of Finance will certainly consider and think about, talk with the tax collector about. But anything? Good question. You were on. Well, let me find you. I'm sorry, everybody. You hear that a lot probably tonight. There you are. You are unmuted. You should be unmuted. Keep trying. No, wait. Try and unmute yourself. Yep, try and unmute. There you go.
Okay, it is an excellent question. I'm going to suggest it's up there in the world of other uncertain things we have. That is why the 1.9 million of surplus is there to handle all that and many other uncertainties. So I agree.
Okay. Lisa, actually, we're going to leapfrog because Lisa's still standing at the microphone. And there was another question, but she had another question just a minute or two later. I do not think that you should fund with the rainy day fund. You should increase the mill rate, even though it is not a favorable thing to do. It would have been better to have raised with a small increase last year and a small increase this year. This is what happens when we stay with a zero increase in mill rates. I don't disagree with that theory that zero increases are not always the right thing to do. And that certainly is the case this year. Last year, we spoke at this meeting and in all of our workshops about the potential to hit zero. And we did so knowing that we would probably have to have an increase this year, but also knowing that we had substantial increases in years past. And we thought as a group that we should give the town a break when we had the opportunity. And we did have the opportunity. And that's why we did it last year. I think this year, and frankly, I'm not throwing this at the schools or the fire department or the library or anyone, but we did not anticipate that we would get hit as hard as we did this year with ADM. We had no way of knowing that our Board of Education finances were going to come at the Board of Finance. Didn't even have any idea that they were going to be where we ended up this year. So yes, you should increase taxes if you know you're going to have to increase them in the following year. If you know you're going to get hit, but if you have an opportunity and you don't see that kind of thing coming, and there was no way to see that coming, I think that's why we did what we did. And the Board of Finance will have more conversation about whether we increase, how much we increase the mill rate, and whether or not we go into the surplus. Bud, anything else? Okay. Next question was from Lee Balducci. She asked the question, should we continue to spend $20,000 on the newsletter when instead it can be put on online and accessed there instead? That's a great question, but the newsletter is both a revenue and an expense. It pays for itself in advertising. It doesn't it doesn't cost us $20,000 to publish that. We make all the money back in advertising, so we should be okay with that. Oh, son of a gun, I didn't see that. Lisa had another question. Escrow companies must pay in the month of July. What is the percentage of payments from escrow mortgage companies? Maybe is it enough to get you until October and not need to borrow the $4 million? We have looked at that. I don't have that number on the top of my head, but it was not enough to get us to carry us 3 months. I believe it was in the vicinity of $2 million is what we expect from escrow, which should get us at least a month and a half. And we really anticipate that we will collect money that everyone's not going to wait until October, but we just don't have an answer for that. So that's the whole reason for the tax anticipation note, is to really, we're just trying to prepare. As we said earlier, our reserve fund is not where it needs to be yet, and we don't have enough to cover us for 3 months. And I'm not sure we need to do that anyway. So, Those are all the questions that I have on chat now. Oh, we got more. Oh, good. Thank you. Bobby Ginder from 137 Kirtland Street. Why was the building's officials' salary over budget last year by 30%? Last year, the building official was, Kirtland Commons was under construction, and the building official was also working as a, well, I don't want to go too far into that. It's a long, long story. It's a couple of years to figure out. But Kirtland Commons was, when they started their project, they did not have a clerk of the works. They had no one to kind of supervise or just manage the project. I think that Dick was probably going to do that over the course of the construction. When Dick died, it became very clear that they needed to have someone do that. Our building official was over there consistently anyway, and certainly had the capability of doing that. We discussed that with the Board of Finance. We knew that he was going to go over, but the position and the work that he was doing was necessary to ensure that that project was done properly and was completed close to what it was budgeted for. Let's see, Bobby had three other questions. What is funded special police services, and why is it over budget last year by 488%? Bud, you can answer that better than I can. You are muted. Thank you for, if it doesn't unmute, okay. Okay, unmute yourself, keep going. Yeah.
That number of police services, as you see constables out on the street directing traffic when there is construction going on, et cetera, those dollars are, when the constable's out there directing traffic for a project, those dollars are paid for. The constable's costs, are paid for by the contractor who is digging the hole. We have no idea what those dollars will be anytime in the future. So we have traditionally just thrown in, I think, $30,000, and as the costs are incurred, they are billed out and reimbursed. So as a couple of the other questions were, we actually receive in revenues more than what is expended, because we charge to a contractor not only the constable's salary, but a adder to cover their benefits and the costs of the car. So if you were to look up the revenue side on police costs, you'll see a substantial cost up there.
Okay, thanks. That was a good one. Why is the police officer's budget shifting from full and part-time to part-time only? As Bud explains during his presentation, full-time officer Ray Cipher is retiring Memorial Day weekend, actually. And discussing this with our resident state trooper and our Board of Finance and our Board of Selectmen, it was determined that we can actually get more coverage, more hours with 3 part-time employees, with 3 part-time constables working 24 hours a week than we can with 1 full-time and 1 part-time, working 40 and 24 hours a week. We also save on insurance costs, and that's why that change is in the budget. We went from 1 part-time and 1 full-time to 3 part-time employees. And we get more coverage, and we get savings in some of our benefits. And Bobby had one more question. Why is the zoning enforcement officer's salary budgeted for half what it was last year? It is now a part-time position? No, the zoning enforcement officer's position was always a part-time position. Kathy had been here, I want to suggest, for 20, 25 years, something like that. She had accrued, and she had a salary that had built up over those years. When Kathy retired, we went back to same hours of the office, but to a salary that is more in line with what our zoning enforcement officers around the state are making on an hourly basis. It has always been a part-time position, and it still is a part-time position. Robert Lenoir from 197 Westbrook Road says, you said that the fire truck, this looks like it's going to you, but you said that the fire truck was the only item you had in your discretion. Is there any consideration for public safety, increased insurance costs for homeowners, safety of volunteers? Is there any research done into common best practice for replacement of fire apparatus? Do you have any current numbers for the cost of repairs or data? Should I, well, we can go back down. Do you have any current numbers for the cost of repairs or data on how often these rigs are broken down? Zero increase is nice, but it's unrealistic to think a town can run with zero investment for the future, is it not? Is there a plan for putting fire trucks in capital replacement? I will put you on, thank you. And please, you're going to have to remind me every time. And you unmute yourself now anytime. There you go.
Yes, all those things were discussed in great detail, I assure you. The removal of the new fire truck was done under great stress and by our Board of Finance. Again, there was a driving theme of the majority of members on the Board of Finance who can speak up for themselves. But under current economic uncertainty, there was the premise that we cannot take on that kind of debt. So yes, we talked about all of those things. We felt that we have an obligation to minimize the tax increase we're passing through. It is not a forgotten obligation. It was approved by the town. Once there is certainty on where the economic fallout of this this condition is, we will revisit the fire truck.
Thank you. There was one other statement in our question in there that I wanted to address. Zero, yes, zero increase is always desirable, but as Lisa pointed out, is not practical. It's certainly not practical this year. I think that the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, we are always looking to balance the need for investment in our infrastructure and the common, the shared interest in keeping our mill rate to a place that we can all afford to live. And I'm looking for something that was to answer Robert. And that is really where we are stuck right now. And that's as Bud described. We have a Board of Finance that is split with that as a big part of the conversation. Next up is Dorothy answering my question to her question. And I think this is going to go to you, Brian. So I'm going to try and unmute you. And let's see. I would like to see if a cut on insurance costs could be cut by sharing costs with all employees. 18% increase is too high. As Bud pointed out, the town is not going up in 18%, but the elementary school is for our insurance. So Brian, if you want to talk about, I don't know, again, the sharing costs with all employees or the 18% interest. Are you going to be looking into your interest or your insurance costs in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so that's been a big part of our discussion this year, prior to the budget development process, and now obviously that we're in it. The 18% increase was based on our claims experience. And so the Board of Education is self-funded. We have a self-funded insurance type. We've done a lot of work this year with our respective boards of education, including Deep River, and our insurance consultant. We've also had a financial task force, which is comprised of representatives of the Deep River leadership, both Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, as well as the other 3 towns that support the region. So the 18%, again, unfortunately, based on claims experience, that was based on Anthem's projections and the work of our consultant. We had, up until recently, 7 entities which contributed to the insurance type that we had. And so in addition to the 5 employing boards of education, our insurance also covered the municipal employees of Essex and Deep River. As you've heard about this evening, the municipal side of Deep River is withdrawing from that insurance, as has the town of Essex. And so in the case of next year, there's not too much we can do to avoid that increase. That represents the cost of doing business. With that being said, we're certainly taking a close look at whether or not moving forward, the type of insurance we have is in fact the best insurance for us. In fact, just last week, we had our insurance consultant present to all 5 of our boards of education to do an end-of-year projection on the health of our insurance fund, as well as to talk about some steps moving forward that we can take. Prior to the COVID shutdown, we were starting the work of getting an insurance committee up and running that would consist of all stakeholders for the purpose of looking at insurance. We're going to continue that work to the best of our ability under the shutdown, but certainly with an eye to the fall. That'll be a focus area for us next year. Our teachers are up for contract negotiation at the end of next year, and that's our largest employee group. And so it really does motivate us to shop the market now, so that if we do make any decisions about changing insurance, we would do so in advance of contract negotiations a year out.
Thank you. I'm not sure about the next question from Jen Colbert. That might be for you as well. Let's see, why 13% increase in health insurance, Deep River Elementary School, still HSA, question mark. So I'm not, I think you just did in fact answer that. You are an HSA, right? Still with the
Correct.
school. Yeah. Okay, Bud, where is the nurses? I think, well, okay, we'll stick with Jen Colmer from Hemlock Terrace, or Jan Colmer, sorry. Where is the nurses revenue? Yeah. I don't know that we have revenue from nurses, Jan.
No, we no longer have a revenue line
Yeah.
like we used to in the
Right.
past,
'Cause
because
it's-
we
yeah,
don't
it's a
have
different-
Deep River
That's right. We don't have
nurses. We contract Lower Valley.
Yep, that's right. And the other one says from Jan is the mill rate listed may be in error. 2018-19 should be 29.42. So we'll look into that. Thank you. When is the District 4 vote, Jan? That vote took place 2 weeks ago.
30th
so
or something.
The 30th, I think. So that vote is done. Okay, let's see. Next page of questions. Jack Baldwin asks from 108 Cedar Lake Road, are any fire trucks we have being sold or retired? I can answer that, but Tim, I tried to turn you on, and you could speak to that if you can try. Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me,
Go
Angus?
ahead. Yep.
Yeah, so, with the.
Got a bad something going on with your speaker, but go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so to answer his question, yes, I mean, if we were to get the new apparatus in this year's budget, once it would arrive and go into service, one would leave, presumably would get sold off, and you know, that money would come back to the town.
Right. What did we do with the last truck? We traded that for some training. We couldn't really sell it.
The last truck we tried to sell over the course of time, and it would not sell. We ended up getting $5,000 worth of training credits over at the Eastern Connecticut Fire Training School.
Thanks, Tim.
Yep.
Let's see, Virginia Pine from 391 Main Street as a statement more than a question. The cost of the fire truck will only increase. It's irresponsible to put it off. Our safety is well worth an increase in mill rate. And then the next thing is from Jan Fulmer again. Keep the mill rate the same. And says leave the mill rate where it is. Kim Clark from Laurelwood Drive. So if the money was set up for the fire truck last year, how is it we don't have it now? Why should the fire department have to suffer for people not paying their taxes? The first question, I think I can answer, Tim. You can, or actually you won't answer that, but Bud, you could probably help me answer that. And I'll unmute you. So, well, I'm not going to unmute you yet until you tell me that I'm. So if the money was set up for the fire truck last year, how is it we don't have it now? The money was set up for the fire truck last year, and the fire department has worked diligently to purchase that truck. But it's not as if you can drive down to New Milford and find a fire truck on the lot. Although I think that they did, in fact, try to do that and try to find some trucks that maybe demos or something like that we might be able to fit to our needs. Instead, the fire truck really needs to be built to the specifications that our fire department determines that we need. That takes about a year's time. The fire department, in the course of the year, has been working towards that. I think they're close to being ready to order it if they are told to pull the trigger. And but that's why we don't have it now. I think the plan was to have it very close to now. Let's see. Why should the fire department have to suffer for people not paying their taxes? I don't believe that that is the reasoning behind the Board of Finance, that the folks on the Board of Finance who are not supporting the fire truck right now. I think it is more a case of not the people not paying their taxes, but maybe not being able to pay their taxes. I think we can should look very hard at what our state is going to be able to continue to provide. As Bud said, a large portion of our budget is assisted by the monies from the state, and I think we can keep our fingers crossed, but I don't know if we have much more to do to try and hope that the state of Connecticut continues with the support that they're giving to the small towns, given the amount of money that the state is losing or spending right now to get through this particular crisis. I think just the numbers that I read the other day, and these are changing every day, but I think the state has $1.7 billion in surplus money right now, and they have over $2 billion in accrued debt just for what they've accumulated already for costs of the COVID-19 crisis. Christine Novak from 36 Winter Avenue. Why is there a line item for a fire truck in this year's budget, but there is no new fire truck? What is your plan to replace it? And if the truck is financed, what would the payment be over 5 years? I think we just talked about why is there a line item for the fire truck in this year's budget, and why there's no fire truck right now. What is your plan to replace it? I would suggest that everyone on the Board of Finance, whether they support the purchase of the truck now or not, recognizes the need for the fire truck and for the new truck. And the plan to replace it would be to go as soon as there is enough comfort on the majority of the members of the Board of Finance. I would hope that this conversation will begin immediately. And there are other thoughts as to how we can replace it. One of which is that we're going to be coming to the town for monies or for the approval to build a new firehouse. Our firehouse is in desperate need to be replaced. We're going to be coming to the town for that money, and it makes a lot of sense to me to bundle that borrow with the fire truck in with the firehouse. We could take a $150,000 payment, $170,000 payment for the truck, and put that into the $150,000 payment for a 40-year borrow for the firehouse, and end up, rather than having a $300,000, two payments that add up to $300,000, we would have one payment that adds up to around $160,000. So there are, as this conversation has evolved, we're already working on trying to find ways to fund this truck and trucks in the future. But okay. Jane Samuels asks, the Deep River Elementary School has a private school class size. When I went to Deep River Elementary School, classes were larger and we did fine. What was the park upgrade? Okay. Right, I'm not sure that there's much to say about class sizes that you didn't already say at the elementary school, but I think you did explain it to the Board of Finance when you came to their workshop about the class sizes versus the number of classes and the number of students. You'd end up with some classes would have 35 kids in them or something like that, but I don't remember specifics.
Sure. Well, I mean, in our presentation earlier this evening, we showed some data about the average class size, and that information is also available on our Board of Education website. And so essentially the data that I shared this evening came from earlier presentations to our Deep River Board of Education. And so for folks that are listening that want to learn more about the current class sizes and the projected class sizes for next year, that information can all be found under the budget tab on our website. But simply said, it really is a values conversation. We look very carefully at student need and the requirements of the classroom. And so when we talk about class sizes, we often talk about your typical grade level academic classroom. To Angus's point, when you look at subject areas that are outside of those traditional classrooms, what many of us think of when we think of elementary school classrooms, your PE classes and other areas may exceed the class size that we see in those individual classrooms. But the class sizes that we maintain are in line with the values of the board. They're in line with our guidelines for class size. And,
No, I'm not yet. I just was curious.
and we'll continue to look carefully at those numbers, as I mentioned. We don't anticipate any real significant decrease in enrollment based on our current projections, but it's certainly something we'll continue to look at and talk about.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, it's always funny to me, and there's nothing funny about much today, but I always look back and say, well, gosh, when I was in school, we had 1 billion kids in our class and we all got fine. And there's no question that was the case, but things are different. We had, one of the things that I remind myself of, and it's easy for me to do that because my sister is a special education teacher. And we did not have special education kids in with our classes. I can't even remember what that's called. We didn't integrate students like we do now. And that provides a need for paras sometimes to be in there. And I'm speaking way out of my class right now. But just the needs are a little bit different now than they were when I was young. I think that might explain that. And Jane, your second question about the park upgrade. We need some equipment. Some of our equipment's down at Flatwood in particular is falling apart, or not falling apart, but it needs to be replaced. And that's what that is. I think that was a $5,000 increase. Mike Danello from 209 Main Street. Hey, Mike, at $233,000 for our resident trooper, how many hours does the trooper spend in Deep River? That's a good question, but the 200, but he's here, Tom is here more than 40 hours a week. But he does not get paid $233,000. That $233,000 pays for our use of the all of the facilities from the Westbrook Barracks and the troop support that we get from them on investigations, on the fact that they have a barracks and a jail that we can use, that they have access to all kinds of investigative tools, as well as backup for our guys in our town if the resident trooper is not working. There's quite a bit of that $233,000 that is not salary. The majority of that is not salary. But Tom is in town a good 40 hours or so, if not more. Jane Samuels again. Gosh. I said that, I'm sorry, I didn't say that because gosh, it was Jane. I said gosh because I was hoping that we could go around with everyone's questions before we get to the same folks. How can we expect to get the expected taxes with people out of work and businesses closed? That's a good question, and that has been a big part of the debate, Jane, and everyone throughout the creation of this budget, and is still part of the debate right now as to where and how we fund the mill rate. Do we go up to a mill and not take anything from our reserve fund, or do we try and buffer this a little bit by taking some of the money that we did not anticipate last year? Virginia Pine, 391 Main. We may not be able to predict economic conditions, but we can predict that there will be fires. As with the planning for COVID-19, we need to plan for adequate working fire apparatus. That is 100% correct. Tony Bolduc would like to come in and talk about the zoning enforcement officer budget. Where are you, Tony? And bear with me a second, and we certainly will be Oops, just passed it. Okay, Tony. And I don't see you at your camera anymore. Here you come running to the camera.
There he is.
All right, there you are. Tony, unmute yourself. Oops. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just letting my dogs out.
Yep,
So
go
you
ahead.
unmuted me.
Yep.
Okay, so I just wanted to throw out that I know we brought the budget down to like 17,000 for the zoning enforcement officer, and I'm thinking
Okay.
bring it back up to like not the full Kathy, 33,000, but somewhere around 28.
You're looking for an increase in hours to do that?
No, just I mean, we went with somebody inexperienced, got $17,000 person, and just didn't seem to work out.
Yeah, we can have that conversation as we look to who we're going to replace Julie with.
Right.
But the concern that I have for that is, without increasing the hours, the salary, the hourly rate that Julie is getting, and that we offered to all of the people who interviewed for that role when it came up, is the hourly rate that most of the zoning enforcement officers around the area, or I think it was the average of the zoning enforcement officers in our region. And we got that information from the Caddick, or
The Casio.
Casio. Yeah. But we certainly we're going to have to replace Julie, so we'll have to see where we go with that.
Right. I guess I mean my concern is I looked at Chester and Killingworth, and they're all up there too. So this is I mean it's lower than we had before, and it's still less than those two towns, but it's it's still a higher number than what Julie was making. I guess my concern is that we want somebody that's going to be able to just jump in and do this job now, and not wait around again.
Yeah, that's a good question, Tony. And we didn't anticipate that Julie was going to leave us.
Right.
When we hired her, she's not leaving us because of the hours that she has, or the hours or the hourly pay that she's getting.
Right.
But that's something that we didn't even know until a day and a half ago. So
Right. But well, yeah. I mean, I know that's why I'm saying it's a terrible timing. And
yep. But we'll have to talk more about that. And certainly we'll talk with the Board of Finance about that now. I don't know where we're going to get.
Okay.
Kim Clark. Okay, thank you. And Kim Clark right here is the next question. Oh no, Carol Flynn. Sorry. Thank you, Tony.
Yep.
Carol Flame from 254 West Elm Street has no question, but would like to offer my support to the fire department. I trust this has been thoroughly considered. Investing in the town's volunteer fire department is an investment in our future. If not now, when? Thank you. That's correct. Kim Clark from Laurelwood Road. Bud said there was no shortfall because of the people not. Bud said that there was a shortfall because of the people not paying taxes. I don't think that's quite what Bud said, but that's just what the statement is. Oh, let's go back to it. Sorry, everyone. Kim Clark. I have to. Really, we're going to go around and do this again. Kim Clark asked, the money was set up for the fire truck last year. Where is it? Why should the fire truck have to suffer for people not paying their taxes? She was referring to the fact that it's not a fact that people aren't paying their taxes. You said there's a potential shortfall. That was the shortfall. That, Kim, was what we were talking about with the possible need for a tax anticipation note. Virginia Payne, Tim's point as to the resale value of a truck again speaks to the amount of money we'll be spending for adequate fire safety. It's not going to get any cheaper. Is the town buying, oh, Kim Clark asks again, is the town buying other vehicles this year? No. Lisa Viviani to the Board of Finance, thank you for trying to keep budgets at a low mill rate, but there comes a time when we need to invest in ourselves, such as the fire truck. It's time to stop trying to be in safe mode when it comes to the mill rate. We just run into shortfalls every year. We need to go the extra step to keep up with the expenses. Thank you again for weighing these difficult decisions. Kim Clark, do we also pay into the pension when they do private duty? I do not believe that we do. That is, they're not on our payroll. When they're doing private duty, they're being paid at others. Do you have another sheet of paper for questions? Thank you. Alan Parody, the salary reduction for ZEO is disproportionate to the other building officials, is insufficient to attract and retrain the required experience and qualifications of a certified ZEO, nor will it meet the necessary hours required for the job. It could be true. Carol Hanover is here. 32 Riverview. Okay, the safety of our fire, I can find that. It's the last one, right? Okay. Carol Hanover from 32 Riverview. The safety of our firefighters and residents should be paramount. Please reconsider your support for a new fire truck in next year's budget. Thank you. Kim B. You didn't identify who. Oh, Kim Clark. Where would everybody be without firefighters? Jack Baldwin from Cedar Lake Road. Does the cell tower at the transfer station generate income to the town? Yes, it does. Stacy Bonello from 209 Main Street. It's nice to see the savings on employee medical insurance. Did I hear the employee contribution is 5%? Why isn't it more? Stacy, we negotiated a contract with the employees 2 years ago now. Up until that contract, the employees were paying zero contribution. Over the course of 4 years, they will be at 7.5% contribution. And new employees are starting at 12.5. This is not anything that we can ask these folks to jump right up to an increase to a double digit. I think we have to look at combine the salaries and the benefits and the contributions toward benefits, and I think and again, I appreciate the negotiation. It took a long time to negotiate that contract, and we got to, I think, a good spot. Stacy would like a job. Okay, Tim, I think that you wanted to just speak for a bit. I know there are more questions coming in, but now might be a good time as soon as they can make that. So let's see if we can get you in here. Can you unmute yourself, because I'm trying to unmute you? Yep, there you go. Okay.
Okay, everyone. Yeah, my name's Tim Lee. I am the fire chief for the town, as most of you may know. I just wanted to clarify a few things here. The fire truck we're talking about replacing is a 1983 engine. So currently it's 37 years old. Be 38, 39 years old if we were to be purchasing a truck now by the time we took delivery on a new piece. We do the next two pieces after that to be replaced are both 1989s. In another, by the time they're getting to their point of being replaced, their ages are going to be up there as well, pushing the 38, 39, 40 years old by the time they're due to be replaced. Currently, one of those 1990 pieces of equipment is first due out of the Union Street station, so it goes to probably 90 90+% of all the runs annually that we do. So a truck that's right now 30 years old, so it's exceeding the recommendations by the NFPA in life expectancy and how long you should be running this equipment. Clarify the timeline a little bit here. The number is always, the number for the fire truck has been a number in our 5-year capital plan for several years now. So that number is there. That's a number that we were aiming for, and the truck committee was to the very close to the end of their spec and getting final numbers. I mean, they were getting down to probably just several more meetings and they could have more realistic numbers. But that number is a number that's been in the budget, not in the budget, but in our 5-year capital plan for a while. And should have been the target all along for Board of Finance to be aiming for. There is some misinformation out there on the equipment, especially the one being replaced now, that it's something that the fire department is just wanting to do. That is far from the truth. This piece of equipment needs to be replaced, and we've got 2 more right behind them that should be getting replaced at the same time right now. The 5-year capital plan has been missed now for a couple of years, and we really just can't keep going on pushing this down the road, because it's just going to cost the town more and more money as the years go on, and the ages of this apparatus it just keeps rising. Maintenance cost is going up due to the age of the apparatus, and I can keep going on and on. I know the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance have heard this numerous times from myself and the chairman of the Board of Fire Commissioners. We made this very clear over the course of the last several years at budget workshop meetings and everything else. But I just wanted everyone else on here tonight to be able to hear it from me. This is a request, a plea from the fire department to the Board of Finance to reconsider this and keep this payment, not the $650,000, but however they want to do it, but the payment over the course of 5 years for that piece of equipment in the budget, to put that back in. That's really it for those comments. I do have one question. I don't have the budget in front of me that was that Bud had up, but can you explain, Angus or Bud, the line you had in there for FEMA fire equipment at the $205,000 for the SCBA's?
Unmute yourself.
Am I ready? The fire department asked for $40,000 for the breathing apparatus. We put that in the budget. Subsequent to that, you applied for the FEMA loan. It got all kinds of confusing when we were trying to recognize both of them. So we put the 250 in the revenue side and the 250 in the capital, so that both it would be up with the town budget. If you do not get the grant, the 40 that you asked for is still in the budget, and we will fund it. It is approved. It would be approved in the budget, assuming the budget is approved, and it will be funded by going into the capital surplus account.
Okay, I'm not sure where the 40,000 is coming from, but it should be 70,000 on the capital plan.
70,000. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 70,000. Okay, 70,000. Then it's 70,000. Whatever number you asked, that is what's in that budget behind the 205.
So the 205 is actually calculated within your numbers of the overall budget, but if we get the grant, then we're in better shape?
I'm not sure I'd phrase it the way you did. Because you applied for a grant to fund what we were funding in a greater amount, instead of funding both of them in the budget, which would got all confusing, we replaced your grant, the 205, and if it comes in, you'll buy whatever you plan to buy with the grant. Absent that grant, we would then go to the 70,000 that you had asked for initially, and it will be funded out of the capital surplus.
Okay.
I had both numbers in the budget for the longest while, and it just got all confused, so.
Okay, the way I saw that 205, and I don't, again, maybe it's just me, and it's like this last year with seeing the truck in the current year that we're in now, the 2019, 2020, seeing that line in there, but no funding there to back it up is extremely confusing. And when I saw
So
the
the funding's in there, the funding's in there. The 205 in the capital is funded in the revenue side. I showed that in my presentation. It's in there.
No, I was talking about the current year we're in now, Bud, for the truck.
No,
was talking-
I find, no, I do not disagree that you have a reason to be hesitant.
When I saw the 205, knowing that currently right now, our request for capital for this year is 70,000 for SCBA's and bottles, I saw the 135,000 there. That would be almost your full first payment on a piece of apparatus. We don't, yes, we're putting in for $205,000 worth of a grant to replace all of our SCBA's, but currently right now, we have a total of 70,000 needed for this current year's budget for full SCBA's and some bottles. I don't have all the numbers of quantities. So when I saw the 205 in there and took the 70 off of that, you got 135,000 there now. That would be, it's not needed. That would go towards that first payment of the piece of apparatus. That's the way I looked at it.
So would
Well, I
it be
can
more
follow that.
accurate to back out the 135?
What's that?
Would it be
No.
more accurate to back out the 135 on that line?
Then if we got the grant, we wouldn't have the authority to spend the 205.
Yeah.
I think
It's just, we're talking about, it's just simpler to do the 205. We'll do either way, you'll get the 70. If you get more of it, you'll get more of it. If the grant comes through, you get it all. And it's in the budget to expend.
Yeah.
It's backed by a revenue
Yeah.
line that matches the dollar amount.
Okay.
and it's, you can't, if you get a grant for $205,000, you can't use 70 of it for what you applied for, and then the other 135 for anything else. That 135 would have to go for what was applied for in the grant. So if you get the 235, it can't go for anything else.
No, to clarify, Angus, I understood that. That's not the point I was trying to make. Definitely not.
Oh, but that's what, I think that's what folks were hearing. So I want to make sure that we're clear about that. Robert Lanoy has another statement. Pardon? Yeah, I thought on Westbrook Road. But I'm going to mute you. Sorry. In case anyone was wondering, normal fire truck replacement, according to the experts, is 25 years. Some departments, like the one I work for, replace frontline pieces every 15 years. Blows my mind that the town I live in and pay taxes to relies on 35+ year engines to save my life and property. All the Weglars, I want to thank the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance for all of their hard work. I know this is a difficult year and I appreciate your efforts. Virginia Pine, 391, thank you for your persistence, Tim. It's got to be frustrating, but absolutely imperative that we make this happen. Alan Parody, 327 Main Street. Recycling fee revenue is dropping 40%, while waste and recycling must have a very modest increase. Recycling, household waste, and bulky waste require a longer-term and holistic analysis. Future increase in waste disposal requires a balancing revenue stream. That's 100% a part of what we are trying to plan on. I expect to have a group come in to speak to the Board of Selectmen sometime within the next month, and then to talk about how Deep River handles our waste, how we reduce our household waste, and what things we can do to save and to better. You know, we're always going to generate garbage, but we need to pay attention to how much it costs for us to remove that garbage or to dispose of that garbage. Let's see. You know, and I think we're at a spot right now. I don't have any other questions in front of me. And I wanted just to comment briefly. This is Actually, there is another question, sorry. I received a letter from John Kennedy, and he asked that this be read into public comment at the town budget hearing on May 5th. John Kennedy on Fairview Avenue. Our Connecticut Secretary of State, Denise Merrill, will now send out forms to all registered voters to request absentee ballots for the primary election in August and the general election in November, with return postage paid. Finally, with a bunch of exclamation points. Not just throwing our hands up and doing away with representative government. Now, we need to extend this absentee voting method to voting on our town budgets, exclamation point, and in all caps, do that now. John, one of the reasons that we are maintaining the same schedule that we use for our budget preparing process in every year, while we're maintaining that schedule this year, was in the hope that we would get to a point where we could gather and have a vote, a public vote, as opposed to the voting process that we are dictated to now by the state. That is not yet the case. In fact, a third executive order was issued last week clarifying that we absolutely, towns are under orders to maintain the process that we are following right now. If something happens and we can change that, then of course we will. This is not a process that anyone is happy about, just like we saw at the Board of Education budget. No one there was pleased with making the votes that they had to make, knowing that there was not going to a town meeting and to a town vote. I think that is the case here. We are all doing the best that we can under extreme circumstances, and we are operating under the law. And I will say, public safety is first and foremost in my mind. We're talking a lot about the firefighters. I know that the governor is putting these laws out with public safety in mind, and we certainly are going to work towards the same thing. I don't see anything else. So I want to just make a quick statement. I'm not sure if this is quite the right time for it, but I would like to take just a moment for us all to consider that we have in fact lost another member of our community today to the COVID-19 virus. And if we could just take a minute to reflect a little bit on that, and I'll come back in a second and remind everyone to finish to complete our conversation for tonight. I'm not sure where we're going to go. If the Board of Finance wants to continue the conversation as part of this public hearing, we have no more questions. Another letter. I have no other letters that were requested to be read into the minutes of this meeting. I do have another letter that was written by Mike Danello. It was emailed to us, but there was no request to be read into this minutes. And if you would like me to read it, I certainly will. I guess you would like me to, because it's the only one that he texted me about. Yep. Let me get to my inbox, Tim, and find it for you. Oh, yeah. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, I'm just looking for this email. Mike Danello, safe. Fire truck documents. Okay, dear Angus, Dwayne, Jim, Finance Board members, and fellow residents, without getting into my typical long-winded notes, I wish to convey my thoughts regarding removal of a new fire truck purchase from the current budget. When Stacy and I bought the Riverwind Inn 3 years ago, we saw the enormous potential, not only for the inn, but for the town of Deep River, sandwiched between two towns that have been for years recognized as three quintessential New England towns where people frequently flock to. This is Deep River. Deep River, in our eyes, had much more potential moving ahead, given its history, topography, and the demographics of its residents, albeit with a plan. It was the perfect opportunity to restore the Riverwind Inn. be part of a vibrant, forward-thinking community, and leave a legacy for our children. We are in a turbulent time as a nation. 9 businesses have closed on Main Street, some COVID-related, others not. Main streets across our country will face large challenges moving ahead to recover and grow. But happily, there will be rewarding opportunities for those towns who put into place a plan, a real plan. Towns with visions, towns with direction, and plans that are put into motion to build great foundations for its residents and of its services will be the success stories of the future. Solid towns with devoted, caring residents, great schools, good infrastructure systems, great locations, great community service departments, and great fire and police services are indisputably essential for the future success of a vibrant business community and to offer a high quality of life for its residents. Deep River is fortunate to have many of these key ingredients in place already. However, these goals and plans are achieved, we should not and cannot move backwards. Forward thinking must prevail. The Dinellos have a vested interest in these critical areas, not only as residents, but as the proud parents of a great young man who is a new property owner in Deep River. As owners of the Riverwind Inn, who attracts guests from around the world, we take our safety and the safety of our guests extremely seriously. More importantly, we have a son who is a volunteer first responder at the Deep River Fire Department. All of our first responders, without the least bit of doubt or hesitation, should have the proper equipment to respond to an emergency at danger, or one of the many businesses throughout Deep River, and yes, your home when needed. It is imperative that these first responders have safe, reliable, and up-to-date equipment for when they will be needed, and they will be needed. Deep River's existing inventory of fire apparatus, has been explained, is antiquated, not up to current safety standards, and will be costing more to maintain repair moving forward. This is the fact, and it will become a cost to all of us in some form or manner. This will not be a frivolous or unthought-out purchase. Kicking this can down the road for future administrations to make a decision will not only be more costly for the residents, but for those of you who disagree with this purchase, how will you react when our first responders are unable to get to your loved ones in an emergency, get to you in a timely manner, or when one of our firemen gets injured or killed while responding to a fire or accident scene because they lack the proper safety tools to do so? We are in favor of and want this valuable piece of Deep River safety to be purchased now, not next year. Michael Dinello will be in there. And there are no more questions. Bud, would you like to, nothing else? No, nothing else? Okay. Nothing else. This is in fact the Board of Finance meeting, so I will mute myself and you can ask the board to discuss or to adjourn.
Just before we do, just a reminder to everyone to send any other comments if they'd like to the Board of Finance at deepriverct.us email, and the boards will be getting that.
Board of Finance, okay. No, me?
Yeah.
Board of Finance, do you wish to stay on the line? It seems like we've heard enough, that we heard an awful lot, that we should have things to discuss. Should we set up another meeting or stay on the line? What is people's thoughts?
We'd have to set up a meeting, a special meeting to discuss if we're going to make a move.
Any changes?
Yeah, to any changes. We have to have a formal meeting.
So we cannot discuss tonight. Very good. Okay. Seems like that is a rational thing to do, that we should schedule a special meeting to discuss what we heard tonight and whether we wish to make any changes. All right. Shall we arbitrarily make that, it's the 18th, we must, if we're going to send out a postcard with our budget, if we're going to make any changes, we should meet quickly.
Yeah.
Can we, this is Tuesday night. How much time do we need to advertise?
We need to have this advertised by Thursday.
Can we meet tomorrow night?
I have a class at 7 o'clock. Can we do Thursday?
I can't do Thursday.
What about next Tuesday then?
We've got to advertise this budget. We have by law, we're required to advertise, I can't remember how many days ahead, but Do I do 5 o'clock? And since several of us are home, but before Laurie's 7 o'clock class, could we go to, we do a 5 o'clock or something?
Yeah, I can do 5
Tomorrow?
When is that?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow.
tomorrow at 5.
I can check, hang on.
I'm good.
I can't do
I'm good.
Thursday. Thursday, I got my final Brown thing, so I can't do that. So,
Yeah, we have to have a budget by Thursday so we could send it to print.
yeah,
Or the proper terminology is.
yeah.
Do tomorrow at 5.
Tomorrow at 5. What say you, gang? Is that a good time?
Good for me.
Good for me.
Gonna
All
have
right.
to be.
All right, John, you're the only silent good for me-er.
Yeah, I'm checking right now. Hang on. Give me a sec. 6th of May. Yeah. No, I'm all right. I'm all right at 5.
You're okay at 5?
I'm good at 5. Yep.
All right, what
Okay.
do you have to do? Send the notice to the town clerk that we are meeting by Zoom tomorrow?
Yep, I will.
All right, thank you, everyone. We will chat tomorrow at 5 by Zoom. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you. Oh, I see there, wait a minute, there are 4 more comments up there. Oh, yep, it will be a Zoom meeting. Okay, that was the last one.
We sign into the finance number, right?
Finance number, I'll send it out. Give
Okay,
me a
well,
few
I got the
minutes.
number here.
Send it out. Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks, everybody, for your comments and your time. Appreciate
Yep.
all of the folks showing up tonight. Thank you.
yes. Very
Cheers.
well.
Ditto here. Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. See you
Good night,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Night all. Thank you all for coming. Brian, Kristen, all the Board of Finance folks, all the zoning, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. Firemen, we appreciate your input.
Yeah.
We'll meet again tomorrow.